I'm no longer sure how to feel about my father. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we start, please like and subscribe the video. The goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers till the end of the year. If you are not subscribed, please do. Anyway, let's begin today's story. I'm new to this sub, and I'm really not sure how to start. I've been reading through some of the posts here for a while, but I didn't think I'd ever need to share something myself. Well, I guess there's a first for everything. English isn't my first language either, so bear with me. So, about my dad. Let's call him Dad, just to keep things simple. Growing up, I thought the world of him. My parents split when I was really young, but I still saw Dad pretty regularly. Every weekend we'd hang out, bike rides, cartoons, and long talks about anything and everything. He wasn't perfect, but no one is, right? He made an effort, and for that, I was grateful. I really loved spending time with him. I guess it's why when I started college, I agreed to move in with him and his wife, let's call her Mom, who lived close to my campus. At first it was great. They welcomed me in, no rent, just focus on my studies. Dad and I got to spend more time together, just like old times. But as the months passed, I started noticing things. Small things at first. Stuff you'd probably brush off if it were just a one-off. Dad had always been a bit particular about how things were done around the house. No big deal, right? Everyone likes things a certain way. But then, it got weird. Like really weird. Whenever he'd walk around the house, if I or anyone else accidentally stood in his way, he'd just freeze, stare at us until we moved. He wouldn't say a word. He'd just stand there with that cold, silent glare until you moved back to where you came from. And then, this is the part that really got me. He'd let out this disappointed sigh, like we'd just ruined his whole day by existing. That sounds ridiculous, right? But it happened every time. It didn't matter if we were in his way for just a couple of seconds. At first I thought, okay, maybe he's just stressed from work. He always has 3 different jobs going on, and it's a lot for anyone. But it wasn't just the blocking thing. He'd get really angry if people couldn't hear him, and he'd repeat himself slowly, like he was talking to an idiot. Do you know where my keys are? Keys, those metal things you use on doors? Like seriously? Every little thing started to set him off. The thing that really started bothering me was how he treated his wife, Mom. He'd ask her to do something, like make dinner or find something for him, and if she didn't do it immediately, he'd snap. I can't tell you how many times I heard him yell, "Why are you so slow?" Or, "What's wrong with you?" She'd just nod and rush to do whatever he wanted, no complaints. I didn't understand why she took it. There were moments when I'd hear him barking orders at her like she was some kind of servant. And it wasn't even big things, Stuff like, "Pass me the remote," or, "Where's my phone?" The way he'd demand things, it was like he was always on the verge of losing it. He'd get really pissed off if she didn't anticipate his needs. Once, she dropped a spoon while setting the table, and he absolutely lost it. I mean, you'd think she dropped a priceless family heirloom or something. He slammed his hand down on the table and shouted, "Can't you do anything right?" She looked so shaken. I offered to help clean up, but Dad just shot me a look like I was stepping out of line. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it over and over. Why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I stand up for her? Because I'm a fucking coward, that's why. It didn't stop there. The way he treated their pets, God, it was hard to watch. They have a dog and a cat, and Dad would go from baby-talking them 1 minute to cursing them out the next if they made any noise or messed up the house. He'd say stuff like, "I swear to God I'm gonna beat the shit out of that dog," but then he'd laugh it off like it was a joke. Except it didn't feel like a joke. He never hit them as far as I know, but the fact that he even said stuff like that really bothered me. He'd go quiet after his outbursts, sulking for hours, like we were all supposed to tiptoe around him until he calmed down. It was exhausting. I started avoiding him whenever I could. I'd come home late or stay in my room until I was sure he wasn't around. When we did cross paths, I'd keep the conversation short. It was like walking through a minefield. One wrong step, and he'd explode. But what really messed me up was how two-faced he was. On some days, he'd be the dad I remembered from when I was a kid, joking around, giving me advice, and talking about life. And then, out of nowhere, he'd flip. I'd say something harmless, and he'd snap at me like I'd insulted him. There was this one night where things got really bad. We were having dinner and Dad was going on about some movie he hated. It was a romantic drama, something Mom liked to watch. He couldn't stand it, kept saying how stupid the characters were and how it was the worst fucking movie ever made. Mom was just quietly eating, not saying a word. But then Dad started mocking her, saying, "How can you watch this shit? It's for idiots." I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped. "Why do you always have to be such an asshole?" The room went dead silent. I immediately regretted it, but I couldn't back down now. Dad stared at me like I'd just slapped him. "What the fuck did you say?" "You heard me," I muttered, my voice shaking. "You treat everyone in this house like shit, and I'm sick of it." I thought he was going to hit me. He stood up, towering over me, his face red with anger. "You don't get to talk to me like that in my house." I stood up too, my heart racing. Maybe I wouldn't have to if you didn't act like a fucking dictator all the time. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. I thought he was going to lose it. But instead, he just turned and stormed out of the room. The days after that were awkward. Dad barely spoke to me. When he did, it was short, clipped responses, like he couldn't stand being in the same room as me. Mom tried to act like everything was fine, but I could tell she was tired of it. I started planning to move out. I didn't care if it meant living in a cramped dorm or crashing on a friend's couch. I just needed to get out of there. But I also felt guilty. Despite everything, he was still my dad. And I kept thinking about how stressed he was, how hard he worked to provide for us. But that didn't excuse the way he treated people, right? I don't know. I'm so confused. I just want to finish school, get a job, and get out of here. I don't want to hate him, but I also don't know how to keep loving someone who's turned into this. Update. Hey everyone. Thanks for all the advice on my last post. I've been reading through the comments, and it really helped to know I'm not alone in feeling this way. So, I moved out. It wasn't easy. Dad didn't say much when I told him I was leaving, just a grunt and a nod. Mom cried a little, but she told me she understood. I think she's just relieved I'm getting away from it. I found a small place near campus. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and that's what matters. I haven't talked to Dad much since I left. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about everything. So, I talked to Dad a few days ago. He actually called me, which surprised the hell out of me. He didn't apologize, not really. But he did say he's been thinking a lot about what I said. I don't know if that means he's going to change, but it's something, I guess. I'm still keeping my distance, though. I need time to heal.